Emily and Daniel Reed lived in what most people would call the American dream. A cozy two-story house with a white picket fence, a shiny SUV in the driveway, and laughter that seemed to float through the windows on weekend afternoons. Their friends often said, "Emily and Daniel are made for each other." And for the world outside, it looked like they were. Daniel worked long hours as a civil engineer, pouring himself into projects that kept him away from home more than he wanted. Emily, a dedicated elementary school teacher, spent her days shaping young minds and her evenings decorating their house, cooking, and planning social events. To outsiders, it seemed like a perfect balance. A loving husband, a devoted wife, and a life full of comfort. But behind the smiles and the picture-perfect Instagram posts, Emily felt a gnawing emptiness. She loved Daniel, but she wasn't in love in the way she used to be. Conversations had become routine, dates predictable, and her nights often lonely as Daniel came home exhausted from work. Then Ryan Reed returned to town. Daniel's younger brother, charming, impulsive, and carefree, had always been the rebellious sibling. The one who didn't follow rules and somehow always got away with it. After losing his job and needing a fresh start, Ryan moved back in with his parents for a few months, just a short drive away from Emily and Daniel's house. Ryan's presence sparked something in Emily she hadn't felt in years. He noticed the little things. The new earrings she wore, the book she read during her lunch breaks, the way her hair caught the sunlight. He listened, really listened, in a way Daniel hadn't in months. At first, their connection seemed harmless. Shared jokes, casual conversations when Daniel wasn't around. But there was a tension underneath, a quiet electricity that neither of them could ignore. Emily found herself looking forward to Ryan's visits more than her husband's presence. She couldn't explain why, and every time she thought about it, guilt crept in like a shadow she couldn't shake. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about him. The seed of temptation had been planted. Ryan Reed was everything Daniel was not. Carefree, magnetic, and effortlessly charming. He had a way of making Emily feel seen, like the tired routines of her life could disappear for just a little while. It began innocently enough. Casual conversations over coffee, a shared joke during family gatherings. But each word, each laugh, felt heavier than the last. Emily caught herself thinking about Ryan at odd times. In the middle of her workday, while folding laundry, even during quiet moments when Daniel was asleep beside her. One evening, Daniel had to work late, and Ryan invited Emily over to help him sort through some old boxes in the garage. The air was thick with unspoken tension as they sifted through forgotten photographs and dusty keepsakes. She laughed at something he said, and he leaned just a little too close, the warmth of his hand brushing hers. And then it happened. A fleeting touch, a spark of electricity, a brush of lips that neither of them expected. But once it happened, there was no turning back. In that moment, Emily realized she was in love with her husband's brother. From that night on, every encounter became more dangerous. Secret texts late at night, stolen glances at family dinners, conversations that lasted far too long under the guise of helping with something. The forbidden thrill of it all consumed Emily. Guilt gnawed at her constantly. She loved Daniel, or at least the version of him she had once loved. But the pull toward Ryan was stronger, impossible to ignore. She tried to tell herself she could resist, that this spark would die down. But Ryan made it feel inevitable, like fate had conspired to bring them together. And with every stolen smile and every secret meeting, the idea began to form in the back of Emily's mind. Daniel is in the way. The line between desire and obsession blurred quickly. Emily and Ryan's meetings became more frequent, their conversations more intimate, and the hidden smiles more dangerous. Every text message from him made her heart race. Every whispered joke in private felt like electricity coursing through her veins. But with desire came guilt. Emily would come home to Daniel and force herself to smile, to act like the loving wife she was supposed to be. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, and clung to their shared history, all while knowing her heart belonged to someone else. Daniel noticed something had changed. He didn't know what it was, but he felt the distance growing between them. Emily's laughter sometimes didn't reach her eyes, and her hand would linger on Ryan's arm longer than she let Daniel see. Meanwhile, Ryan encouraged her darker thoughts. He whispered that they could be together if only Daniel weren't around. At first, Emily shook her head, horrified by the thought. But every day, every stolen moment, chipped away at her moral defenses. She began to fantasize about a life without Daniel. A life where Ryan and she could be free of guilt, free of hiding. The dangerous idea grew, an idea that started as a whisper and turned into a plan. Daniel had to be removed, discreetly, cleanly, in a way that would never point back to them. Emily's mind raced, calculating, justifying. "It's not murder if it looks like an accident," Ryan said, his voice a mixture of reassurance and seduction. And Emily, consumed by her forbidden love, began to believe it. The once perfect wife, the devoted partner, was slipping into something unrecognizable. She smiled at Daniel, but behind that smile lurked betrayal, lust, and a deadly determination. The fantasy of a life with Ryan became more real than her life with Daniel, and the plan slowly solidified in the darkest corners of her mind. Emily's thoughts twisted further as the affair with Ryan deepened. The idea that Daniel stood in the way of her happiness no longer shocked her. It consumed her. The more she imagined a life without him, the more she convinced herself it wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Ryan became her co-conspirator, their passion fueling every dark plan. They whispered in hushed tones, mapping out every detail with a cold precision that made Emily shiver with a mixture of fear and excitement. At first, the plan seemed impossible. How could anyone remove a loving husband without suspicion? But Ryan reassured her. Accidents happen all the time. A slip, a fall, a drowning, it could all look natural. They decided on a weekend getaway to Lake Travis, a secluded spot Emily claimed would help Daniel unwind from work stress. The lake's cliffs and quiet coves provided the perfect stage for what they were about to do. Emily suggested they stay at a small cabin nearby, ensuring privacy and minimal interference from neighbors. Every detail was discussed. Timing. Late evening, when the shadows were long and few people were around. Location. A cliffside trail near the water's edge, rocky, steep, and isolated. Execution. One push would send Daniel stumbling toward the lake. Deep water, strong currents, and darkness would do the rest. Alibi. Emily would call for help immediately, sobbing and panicked, ensuring the authorities saw her as the distraught wife. Ryan would coincidentally arrive to assist, cementing the appearance of concern. They practiced the story in their heads. Emily would be the grieving widow, inconsolable, unable to comprehend how her loving husband had met such a tragic fate. Ryan would be the supportive brother, always nearby but never implicated. The plan was meticulous. It was flawless, or so they thought. Yet even in the secrecy of their plotting, fear crept in. Emily occasionally paused and imagined the consequences if they were caught. Life in prison, public shame, the horror on Daniel's parents' faces. But each time, Ryan would whisper to her, soothing her terror with promises of a life together. And each time, the thrill of their forbidden love won over her guilt. By the time Friday evening arrived, Emily's nerves buzzed with a dangerous mixture of adrenaline and anticipation. She hugged Daniel tightly as they left for Lake Travis, smiling like the devoted wife while her heart pounded for a life that no longer included him. That night, under the silver glow of the moon and the quiet watch of the lake, Emily and Ryan's plan was ready to be executed. The line between fantasy and reality had vanished. The picture-perfect life she had built with Daniel was about to end, and she and Ryan would step into a future that could only exist in shadows. The night was unnervingly calm. A soft breeze rustled the trees along the cliffs of Lake Travis, and the moon cast silver reflections on the water below. Emily's heart thumped in her chest, each beat a drum of fear and exhilaration. Daniel walked beside her, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I'm glad we came," he said, stretching his arms, trying to take in the serene beauty of the lake. "It feels good to get away from work for a bit." Emily smiled, the practiced, loving smile of a devoted wife. Inside, she felt nothing but anticipation. Ryan lingered in the shadows nearby, watching them, waiting. Every instinct screamed at Emily. The thrill, the danger, the forbidden love, and she leaned into it. They walked toward the cliffside trail, the narrow path winding along the water's edge. Daniel stopped at a bend to admire the moonlit lake, leaning on the railing. He didn't see Emily tense beside him. Her mind raced, rehearsing the motion over and over. One push, just enough force to make him stumble, just enough to tip the balance. She stepped closer, heart pounding so loudly she feared he would hear it. "Daniel, look at this view," she said, her voice soft, coaxing. He turned toward her, smiling. In that instant, all hesitation evaporated. Emily's hand pressed against his back. A sudden, forceful shove. Daniel flailed, his arms reaching for balance. A scream escaped his lips. Sharp, panicked, terrifying. Then a splash. Silence. Emily's body shook, but she forced herself to act. "Daniel! Oh my God!" she cried, tears streaming down her face. She fell to the ground, wringing her hands, sobbing. "Somebody help! He's gone!" Within minutes, Ryan appeared as if by chance, running toward them with wide eyes. "Where? What happened?" he shouted, perfectly in character. He grabbed Emily's shoulders, holding her while pretending to scan the water for Daniel. Rescue teams were called. Emily screamed, collapsed, and pleaded for them to save him. She played the grieving widow flawlessly, while Ryan kept his distance, carefully maintaining his alibi. The lake swallowed Daniel's body, the deep water hiding the truth. To the world, it was a tragic accident. He had slipped, lost his footing, fallen into the lake. There was no way anyone could suspect foul play, at least that's what Emily and Ryan believed. For the first time that night, Emily allowed herself a private glance at Ryan. Their eyes met, filled with a dangerous mix of triumph and desire. In the darkness, by the silver water, their plan had worked. But even as adrenaline coursed through her veins, a whisper of doubt crept in. A fleeting thought that perhaps this was only the beginning of consequences neither of them could foresee. The line between victory and disaster had never been thinner. The weeks after Daniel's death were a blur of grief, condolences, and public sympathy. Emily cried at the funeral, hugged Daniel's friends and colleagues, and appeared utterly devastated. To the outside world, she was the grieving widow, the picture of heartbreak. But beneath the facade, unease began to creep in. Emily noticed the smallest details that made her pulse quicken. A detective's lingering gaze, neighbors whispering about Ryan's strange presence that weekend, and the fact that Daniel's parents seemed to sense something was off. At first, these observations seemed inconsequential. Daniel had drowned. Accidents happen. But the more Emily tried to convince herself of that, the more the nagging voice of doubt grew louder. Detective Alvarez, a meticulous investigator known for noticing the tiniest inconsistencies, began asking questions. Why hadn't Emily called 911 immediately? Why did Ryan appear in multiple witness statements as being nearby by chance? Why were there no signs that Daniel had slipped? No rocks disturbed, no footprints indicating a struggle. Emily's careful plan had relied on a flawless performance. Sorrowful widow, supportive brother nearby, tragic accident. But the cracks were starting to appear. Even small details, easily overlooked by a casual observer, were now being scrutinized. A neighbor mentioned seeing Emily and Ryan speaking in the shadows near the lake the night Daniel died. Security cameras near the cabin captured Ryan's car driving suspiciously close to the lake at odd hours. Emily's heart raced. She had always thought she could control everything. The affair, the murder, the narrative. But now the control was slipping. The world outside her carefully constructed lies was closing in, and she felt a cold knot of fear tighten in her stomach. Ryan tried to calm her, insisting that everything would appear natural. "We were careful," he said. "They'll never suspect us." But Emily could see doubt flicker in his eyes too. Even he wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. Guilt, fear, and desire formed a dangerous cocktail, leaving Emily trapped in a fragile balancing act. One misstep, one overlooked detail, could unravel everything. and Detective Alvarez was determined to find that misstep. Emily had been careful. Every word, every gesture, every tear had been rehearsed to perfection. She played the grieving widow flawlessly in public, a portrait of heartbreak. But grief, fear, and guilt were heavy burdens, and even the most meticulous plan has its weaknesses. It began with small inconsistencies. A friend of Daniel's noticed Emily's eyes glancing toward Ryan more than once during the wake. A neighbor remembered her voice sounding oddly calm on the phone while describing Daniel's fall. Emily laughed it off. Nervousness, she told herself. But the cracks widened. Detective Alvarez returned to the scene, asking detailed questions about the night at the lake. Emily answered carefully at first, but under the weight of scrutiny, her words began to falter. Daniel, he was just walking, and then, she hesitated. He slipped, or maybe he lost his footing. Alvarez's pen paused. The word maybe lingered in the air. A subtle but damning hesitation. Small details started drawing attention. Why did Ryan's car appear on security footage near the lake at the exact time of Daniel's death? Why had Emily insisted on a weekend trip to a secluded spot rather than a safer, public location? Why did Daniel's last text message, a draft never sent, hint at suspicion? The first real mistake came during an interview at the station. Emily, nervous and exhausted, mentioned something Ryan hadn't approved. I felt like he was going to catch us. I mean, she trailed off, realizing immediately that her words could be interpreted as something sinister. Detective Alvarez's gaze sharpened. He noted every hesitation, every unnatural pause, every change in tone. Emily felt it. A cold, creeping realization that the web they had spun was beginning to unravel. Even Ryan, her co-conspirator, began to falter under pressure. He grew distant, jittery, and defensive. The perfect plan they had devised with such careful precision was now threatened by human imperfection. Fear, emotion, and the relentless eye of the law. Every lie, every touch of deceit, was under scrutiny. Emily and Ryan had convinced themselves they were untouchable, that their love and planning had created a flawless crime. But Detective Alvarez was proving them wrong. One misstep, one careless word. That was all it would take to bring their carefully constructed world crashing down. And soon that moment would arrive. It happened on a gray Tuesday morning. Police knocked on Emily's door, their presence calm but unyielding. Panic surged through her as she opened it. Ryan behind her, feigning confusion. Detective Alvarez stepped forward. Emily Reed, you're under arrest for the murder of Daniel Reed. Emily froze. Ryan's face went pale. The lies, the careful planning, the affair, all exposed. Under questioning, Emily broke instantly, confessing everything. Ryan's role, the plan, the shove into the lake. Nothing was left unspoken. The picture-perfect couple's love story had ended in betrayal, murder, and a cold realization. No secret, no matter how carefully hidden, could escape justice. The courtroom was packed. Daniel's family, friends, and neighbors filled the seats, their eyes fixed on Emily and Ryan, who sat side by side but worlds apart in reality. Emily's tears were no longer convincing. Her carefully rehearsed grief had crumbled under the weight of evidence. Texts, security footage, witness accounts, and her own confession. Ryan, once confident and charming, now appeared hollow and defeated. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict. Guilty. Emily Reed was sentenced to life without parole. Ryan Reed received 40 years in prison. The lovers who thought they could rewrite their lives together now faced separate, long sentences. A bitter end to their dangerous passion. Outside the courtroom, Daniel's mother whispered, her voice trembling, "You killed the love he gave you, the life he built with you, for nothing." Emily's picture-perfect life was gone, replaced with steel bars, guilt, and public shame. Ryan's freedom and charm had evaporated, leaving only the consequences of desire, betrayal, and murder. In the quiet that followed, one truth remained. Passion without morality can destroy everything in its path, including the ones you claim to love.